to welcome all of you here, and especially to thank Premier the Honourable Dr. Rufus Ewing for being with us here in Toronto. Many of you are entirely familiar with the way the business has developed from Canada into the Caribbean, and you probably will not be surprised by much of what I will say about the statistics. What we would like to do today is to share some of those statistics with you, share some of the trends with you, invite Dr. Ewing to share some comments with you from 2 points of view. First, he will, well, not necessarily first and second, but during his comments he will talk about both his own country, which is developing rapidly and which is, in our opinion, fortunate to have his competent leadership. We'll talk about how things are going in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and he will fit that into the Caribbean context. The Turks and Caicos Islands, as you know, is one of the 30-plus members of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and is rapidly taking an upfront and leadership position, really, within the CTO. So what we would prefer to do, and with the Premier's permission, I will say that we would prefer to have an interactive session, so that we, rather than deliver prepared speeches, or I could deliver a 3-hour prepared speech if you would like, but I think you would not like. Rather than do that, we would like to make our remarks and then have you ask whatever questions you wish. So, to those statistics. Visitor arrivals to the Caribbean from Canada have grown consistently over the past 5 years. In fact, I remember being in a room not unlike this one and saying with pride and some immodesty that the Caribbean had at that point attracted more than 2 million Canadian visitors, when that was a really very important landmark, when we realized that a population of the size of still under 35 million had been developing that many visitors to the Caribbean. Well, guess what? It's now past the 3 million mark. So Canadian visitors to the Caribbean now number just over 3 million of the 25 million total visitors who came to our shores in 2012. 2012 saw a 6.8% increase in visitor arrivals from this market. 2013, however, continues not to be in the same vein. So we've started the first quarter with a challenge. In fact, a number of our reporting countries have shown decline so far for the first quarter of 2013. Travel by Canadians to other countries, excluding the US, is increasing. According to our statistics, it's showing, and many of these come from the Conference Board and Stats Canada, 2.7% increase in the March-April period to other destinations, and the arrivals to the Caribbean are lagging a little bit in that first quarter. So we recognize the fact that even though Canada has grown consistently for the last 5 years, even though there was a healthy 6.8% increase at the end of last year, we are seeing a little bit of a challenge so far this year. Is it a cause for panic? No, but it is a cause for concern. It tells us that there's some things that we really have to be paying attention to here in Canada. We recognize the fact that the Canadian economy is continuing to grow, and again the Conference Board of Canada says that it will grow not robustly this year, but at a rate of just under 2%. So it is growth, and it is following a pattern of continuing to grow in the Caribbean, but we are watching the signs of what we have to be aware of now. When last we met, we shared with you the fact that as an organization whose purpose is leading sustainable tourism, one sea, one voice, one Caribbean, that is the purpose of the CTO, leading sustainable tourism, one sea, one voice, one Caribbean. As that organization, which after all is the tourism development entity for the Caribbean region, we were ourselves doing some reorganizing and restructuring and rethinking. At that time, when we spoke at the last Caribbean Week in Toronto, we told you that we were in the middle of a reorganization. So this organizational audit and review process developed for us a new direction, including a new vision for the CTO. And so coming out of that fairly detailed, intense process is the vision that we will position the Caribbean as the most desirable year-round warm weather destination by 2017. It's a tall order. The vision of the CTO is to position the Caribbean as the most desirable year-round warm weather destination within a 5-year period. In order to do that, there are several important steps that we must take, and they involve you. Johnson John Rose started off by thanking you, members of the press and members of the Canadian public in general, for your continued support of the region. And we recognize the fact that not only must we give you the tools to help to promote our destination to your various audiences, but we must also give you the justification, give you the confidence to continue to do that. So when we talk about, therefore, making the Caribbean the most desirable, inherent in desirability is the business of visitor satisfaction. If we're going to be the most desirable, we have to pay a great deal of attention to how you and your clients and your families and friends are experiencing the Caribbean product. We've created a mechanism which will measure exactly that. It is designed specifically to measure visitor satisfaction. So total visitor satisfaction is the aim of a system that we have called guest vitality. We've branded it guest vitality. And why guest vitality? Because we're in the hospitality industry, and the root of the word hospitality is host. And so most programs that you encounter really talk about the host. We've developed a program that is singularly focused on satisfying the guest. That's why it's branded guest vitality. So without boring you with the mechanics of it, we have surveyed thousands, literally thousands of visitors to determine the criteria that matter to them when they're visiting the Caribbean. And we certainly expect that visitors to the Caribbean expect different things than when they visit some other part of the world. And from that list, we have culled 7 criteria against which our destinations in the Caribbean will now be scored by the visitors to our region. And so when a destination hits that particular score, the destination is guest vitality rated, receives the score of visitor satisfaction, total visitor satisfaction. So the program is now at a stage where we've done the science, we've done the research, we're comfortable with the mechanics of it, and we've now tested it in 6 pilot countries in the Caribbean. I'm saying all of that to say that the Caribbean is not taking visitor satisfaction lightly. We're fairly comfortable in saying that this program will do 2 very important things. One, it will, without doubt, help our visitors to understand that we are paying a great deal of attention to their needs. And 2, it will show us where we need to improve If there are areas where a destination is falling short of reaching that total visitor satisfaction level, then the destination will itself, and perhaps with our help, work towards increasing the level of satisfaction that it offers to its clients. We recognize that we cannot possibly achieve the vision which I mentioned at the beginning on our own. I mentioned the collaboration with you, but also there's an important partnership that has to occur, and that's the private sector partnership. We have formed the Caribbean Tourism Organization. Many of you know that we own a company called Caribbean Tourism Development Company. It is a direct 50-50 partnership between the Caribbean Tourism Organization and the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association. That partnership has given rise to a company called the CTDC. And the CTDC's responsibility is to market the Caribbean brand worldwide. Here in Canada, you've started to see and will see more of that Caribbean logo, which is on many of our collateral materials. That needs to become more visible in Canada. We've heard from you. Yesterday we certainly got some very strong feedback, and no doubt before the end of today, before the end of our visit here, we will get more feedback from you as to how we can make sure that the Caribbean has a stronger and more visible presence here in Canada. One of the things that you perhaps have seen us do in making that happen is to spread the word of the Caribbean across the country. Mind you, the statistics show that still 75% of the visitors to the Caribbean come from this part of Canada. 64% approximately come from the province of Ontario, and about 11% from Quebec. But that number is shifting. That percentage will shift as more and more of our destinations head further west to try and bring traffic from across Canada. Clearly all the way over to Vancouver, but some of our member countries have also been prospecting for business, as you know, in Alberta particularly. And I should have said at the beginning that if there's anyone in the room with family and friends who've suffered the trauma really of what's happened with those floods in Calgary, our thoughts and our prayers are with you. In fact, I've been told that even here in northern Ontario, there's been fairly significant flooding as well. Measuring our economic growth is one of the issues that the Caribbean has to pay a great deal of attention to. Earlier, one of the journalists was asking me how we actually measure the success of Caribbean tourism. Surely there must be several different metrics. Well, as you and I know, the most basic is the arrivals, because the first order of business is to get people to come to your country. So when we say that 3 million Canadians are coming to the Caribbean, we say that with a great deal of pride, because that's a larger number than have ever come to the Caribbean. 25 million people in total, as far as stayover visitors are concerned, that's the largest number that's ever come to the Caribbean. But a really very important metric is the spend, is the revenue. And as you know very well, in tight economic circumstances, revenue continues to be a challenge. It is such a badge of honor for consumers to negotiate cleverly. The negotiator is the big hero. Frequently, people will say, "Well, what did you pay for that? $500? Oh, I only paid $350." It gets to the point where almost whatever figure you put out there, a consumer expects to negotiate it downwards, and that's a challenge for our destinations and for our accommodation sector. So we've put mechanisms in place to continually deal with that competitiveness and most especially to measure the effect of tourism on our economies. And so there's a fairly detailed plan which the Caribbean Tourism Organization, in collaboration with other partners, have instituted to make sure that tourism satellite accounts, which is a system of measuring tourism's contribution to the economy, TSA as it is called. We are an industry of acronyms. We are in the process of making sure that TSA is instituted in as many of our CTO member countries as possible. So in summary, we look at how we're doing on an ongoing basis. We look at how we're doing regionally as well as by member country, because our responsibility at the end of the day is to make sure that our member countries also benefit, our member countries buy into and work in sync with us in terms of that overall vision. When we talk about the regional vision, it has to be a vision that also makes sense to our individual member countries. To position the Caribbean as the most desirable year-round warm weather destination by 2017 only makes sense if every member country of the CTO is walking in step with that vision. It can't just be a CTO vision. So everyone, that really is the essence though, isn't it, of the oneness of one Caribbean. And so we have to constantly be watching how that works, tweaking it and changing it, constantly looking at how the business of visitor satisfaction is working, improving that and tweaking it, constantly surveying how our visitors feel, and understanding very clearly that not only do we want them to come back, but we want them to recommend the Caribbean to others as well.